So I'm glad you're here. I'm stoked that you're interested in this subject matter, although I'm not surprised at all because our community, mountain bikers in general, are really competent when it comes to trails and understanding the sustainability aspects of trails, understanding the experience of trails. And your faculty here this morning, Rich and Chris in particular, are really knowledgeable in this area. They have literally global experience in what they're going to be talking to you about. I mean, I don't think I can overstate it. You're going to be listening to and having the facilitation of probably some of the world's most knowledgeable trail experts that there are. That's a pretty special thing. It sounds a little self-serving because they work for IMBA, but it honestly is true. So soak that in.
So you're going to hear from an advocacy standpoint, for me, you'll hear from a design and build experiential component from Trail Solutions. Planning and strategy. Why do we do it? I should have flipped these because the quotes really sort of go in to the why you do it, and this is more like how you do it. The best, starting with the process, quoting Ike, he said, "In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." What he meant there is that the process of going through the planning thing helps you understand the field better. You know what's going on, you know where you need to be, you kind of have a good feel. But the second that first shot is fired, all goes out the window and you got to deal with what's in front of you. That's the same thing with land managers. You lay out the plan, you have all the stuff, you get out there and there's a toad. And all of a sudden, everything's got to change. So you have to be adaptable and ready to do that. But you've gone through the planning process, you know what you're trying to do, and you can adapt and you can think through it because you've done the process. Then the other part of that is knowledge. And quoting Sun Tzu in The Art of War, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. This is the key. You have to know what you want and what your land manager is capable of. If you don't know those things, you're going nowhere. So when I think of this from an advocacy perspective, the first step that I would take is knowing what you as an organization are, what you're capable of, and what your community wants and needs. If you don't have the volunteer capacity to build 18 miles of trail, don't even kid yourself that you can do it. Start with a mile. Work to it. If you have amazing fundraising capacity and a huge bankroll, you go crazy. If you don't think about what you can do. And also understanding that even you as a club are not the only entity. There are other parts of the community that are going to be involved. Maybe not just mountain bikers. There could be another set of mountain bikers. There could be equestrians and birders and arborists and all these other people that have ideas for the landscape. So you need to bring them in and get their buy-in to what's going on, or you're going to run into hurdles that'll stop projects. The other part, knowing your land manager's sideboards. Okay, I hear a lot. Well, let's change what they can do. Let's get the Forest Service to do these things. Let's talk about reality. If there's something coded in a law or in a deed to a piece of property, that's not going to change. If it's in a deed, nobody's going to change that unless you can buy it and erase it. And sometimes you can't even buy that property and erase it out of the deed. So that's where you get a lot of state and municipal lands have those limitations baked into them from when they were acquired by the public place. So if it says passive recreation, it's not a place where you start thinking about putting a lot of trail. That sort of thing. So you have to have an understanding of all their sideboards, whether they're regulatory, legal, land-based. And then step 3, finding the solutions. Having an open mind and a creative mind that says, where can I do what I want to do and how do I make this work within the framework is really the key. So with that in mind, we'll talk about some different types of trail strategies. And I'm going to ask these two to chime in as they're ready. But you can see here we have a scope that you're working with and an objective. And sometimes you could start from either side of this, right? You know that you've got something in mind, but you don't know where it falls in the scope. How big is it, right? So just some examples. This is a regional trail strategy using a zone methodology where you're just sort of saying, yeah, we could put some trails that are like this here in this block, and more trails that are over here in this block, and a bike park in this block. It's really broad. But this could be something really simple that you could do on your own. And if you've done your homework and you know what each blob, how it covers the land manager's space, you know it's going to work. And you've sort of started to get buy-in from them, and then all of a sudden, this is your pretty picture that you take to the mayor's office, and you take to the funder, and everybody else, and then they go, oh, I kind of get that. This is an example of a regional trail strategy using a corridor base. This is some of this could be a lot of existing work that you just want to make sure that you plan the experience. Where you're going, oh, we know this is the wicked backcountry route. We don't want to do anything there. We just want to make sure it's clear every year, and that's it. You know. Whereas this might be, oh, this stuff's all really close, and this is the nice beginner loop. We want to make sure that that's butter smooth and good for the kids. And this is where the NICA one is because there's camping over here, so we have the NICA race course over here. We want to make sure that that's clean and ready, but challenging, and we spend a little more effort on it. That sort of thing. So this is a really good example, but it's really defined because a lot of it already exists. I'm going to jump through these pretty quick. This is a trail system, and you can see we're dealing with 2 land managers, not 9, or one massive one. So the character of the trail sort of changes as you go between them, where as soon as you get on, this was private land?
Yep.
So as you got onto the private land, they're like, gnar it up, do whatever. You know, and this starts to get rad, and this is more, no, because the risk management tolerances of the different landowners is vastly different. And then this is an individual trail strategy. This is like uber detailed. It doesn't, you won't always get this detail, but there are more and more land managers that are wanting to get to this level where you can see here, they're saying this is what's here, this is what's here, this is what the spec is, this is exactly what those features look like. And this is partially a planning thing and largely a risk management thing.
So I'm just going to go through some plan types, what they get you, where they kind of fall in the flow of things, throw out questions throughout this, like whatever really comes to mind. But you know, we'll kick right off into master plan. But you know, every agency does some sort of planning. This is a Tahoe Rim kind of blob map that is the recreation opportunity spectrum. So it really highlights areas where they want rec, where they don't want rec, where it might be acceptable, where it's not acceptable, what types of recreation, more of a land type definition. So that's super blobby BLM. This is a full-on multi-use trail plan that they put together up in the, I believe that is up in the Florida area. And then a little more specific, and we actually have that copy of this plan here, is the a more specific, especially user-specific mountain bike concept plan, master plan that has some pretty vetted tight alignments in it. So your master plan is one of those that it's a little bit conceptual, but all the alignments, not all of the alignments, most of the alignments tend to be field-proof. They're pretty highly feasible, and when I throw out feasible, I mean it can be done. It might be $12 a foot trail, but if you need to get a trail through there to make a key connection, it's possible. So when we're throwing out feasible, it just means it can get done. It doesn't mean it can get done cheaply, it can get done quickly, but it can be done. So when you're putting together these master plans, your alignments tend to be field verified. Your trailheads are field verified. Like, this is an awesome place for a trailhead. It has great access. It's a flat spot. Your paving costs are going to be pretty low to develop it. You have easy access to bring a crane in to drop a portage on in. There's even room to build changing rooms. So, you know, really things are getting vetted down to a little bit more detail. Your intersections are generally field verified and feasible. So you're locating intersections where you can run trails uphill and do it. So where you're not having high-speed bikers crashing into a super popular trailhead. So your intersections, your trailheads are all field verified, all highly feasible. These can be for different uses, multi-use, can be single use. You're starting to define experiences a lot in here, so you are going to say, okay, well, maybe this green trail up here is multi-use, multi-direction. We have this pink spur off here. This is single direction for mountain bikers, dual direction for hikers. No equestrians through here due to wetland areas. Maybe this light blue over here has a different experience, a different use pattern. So you're starting to really define those use patterns, those experiences, those desired experiences. So concept plan, a lot of people will talk about a concept plan and think it's a master plan. I always treat a concept plan as a way to sell the idea to the stakeholders, to the land managers, to everybody making the decision by showing them exactly what is envisioned for this property, where the alignments are, lots of pretty pictures, and really defining the experiences. And really kind of on this experience kick lately when I'm doing planning is not even referring to the trails as trails, referring to them as mountain bike experiences. This is the experience that we want to create. And with a concept plan, you start creating pretty renderings like that so you can see, okay, we're going to put a flowy, jumpy, bermy thing in the forest, and you can take that to anybody, even a non-rider, and sell it. Everybody's got smiles on their faces.
The local community person doesn't see this as a pump track, but what they get out of that is they get the scale. How big are these piles of dirt we're talking about? Because you say piles of dirt bikes, and what are they thinking? They're thinking X Games. Right. You put 30-foot tall piles of dirt in the woods, what woods are going to be left? So it's small, and it's got kids. You've got a picture of a kid in the woods. Hey, that's awesome. So and that's going to be a steady theme through the concept stuff. Is it gives a sense of what's there. So from the riding community, people can tell whether it's single track versus flowy, bermy kind of stuff. Whether it's jumps, it resonates to the riders, so they can buy into it. And then it gives some sense of the project to people who really have no idea about mountain biking, except that you're their taxpayers and you're their citizens, and you want to do something cool in their community, and they can't grasp it. These pictures enable them to grasp it and feel comfortable saying, yeah, that's a great idea.
So now we have the feasibility plan, which is just straight feasibility. This one is actually up out of Glenwood Springs, and this is taking a look at all the different land agencies. There are 3 up there that you're working with. All the different, how they interface with one another, different experiences that were identified during the stakeholder meeting, where those experiences can be cited, both for ease of access, both for the user, for emergency access, for construction, and how it fits in different levels of bureaucracy. So you want to identify those. And so through this, you start to create a pretty clear picture of what can go where, when you're going to time it, who you need to start contacting now, so BLM, Forest Service, and start working with, so 5 to 10 years down the road, you can actually put a shovel in the ground. And in the meantime, you've already got approvals from the city and you're digging this summer. So you're building out the city while you're working with the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service, so you can start getting into those lands when all that stuff's done. So that's kind of the level of feasibility plan. No actual alignments are really identified. It's more kind of, oh, we could do something downhill over here, maybe a climb over here, big backcountry experience back in there. But it's identifying all the players and all the experiences, how they're going to play along.
So yeah, like I said in the introduction earlier, I'm Patrick. I'm the regional director for the Southwest. And before that, I worked for the Youth Conservation Corps in Vermont, and part of what I did there was grants director. I don't know why I have this fascination with writing grants and raising money. Some people are terrified about it. There are pieces of it that I don't enjoy, but there are pieces of it that I really do. I think it really crystallizes your project, and you can put it all into one document. It really makes people think very, like the committee or the team developing the project. It makes people think really critically and start to really put some sort of meat onto the bones of the project, and it's great to see it all written up in one place. I really like to see I love seeing funding coming for a project. I think it really is putting mountain biking in a whole new place now. When we were a bunch of dudes with 6-pack of beer and $500 a couple of years ago, and to see grants of $10, $20, $30, $50, $100,000 coming to the mountain bike project, I think is a good thing. So a couple of steps. Let's talk about a couple of steps for fundraising for trail projects. Up at the top here, it's really important for folks to communicate with the team that you're working with. Say you have a board of your chapter board. You might have 4 people who are the fundraising committee. It's really important that everyone else knows what you're doing, because in small towns there's a lot of overlap, and it's really important that say you're working with the Chamber of Commerce, for example, that there aren't like 2 different people contacting the Chamber of Commerce because one guy happens to be their neighbour and another woman happens to ride with the Chamber of Commerce director. So communicating and developing a plan internally of who are we going to contact and which type of organizations are we going to approach and who's the point person. That's kind of the number one. Before you even go to these organizations or even start brainstorming a list, get a plan together of who's going to be taking the lead. And if whatever your project is, it's going to evolve. What you decide or plan to do now will look similar but very different whenever it's on the ground in 2 years or 3 years time. But at least getting some kind of a summary document together, like a white paper, if you want to use that term, outlining who you folks are, what your chapter or what your club's all about, and a summary of the project. We want to develop a 9-mile trail system with a 2-mile kids loop and a 4-mile flow trail or whatever it is. Just having some of those some sort of facts and figures around your project summarized into one place. And it's also really important so that you have that one document and everyone's talking the same language. Whenever someone bumps into the chairman of the local Rotary, or someone bumps into the chairman of the local scout troop or the city mayor, that you're all talking about the same thing. So having the project sort of summarized just into 2 pages, real simple, is a very important step. And then thinking about sources of funding, where money comes from. You've got the traditional sources that sort of always jump to mind. There are bike shops who support the industry, or bike shops who support mountain bike clubs. Has anyone here ever worked or owned a bike shop? I'm sure some of you guys have worked. Yeah. Bike shops are extremely generous, and they're usually very community minded and very philanthropic, but they're quite often tapped out because they're getting hit up all the time for a camelback for a raffle, and can you donate a bike? Those things all hit their bottom line in some way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those things all hit their bottom line in one way or another. So hitting up bike shops is generally not something I do. If they want to be part of what you're doing, if you're having a raffle or whatever, that's cool to keep them involved. But don't think of a bike shop as kind of your sort of pot of gold where the big money's going to come from. Quite often bike companies, like I know that Norco and Specialized both have grant programs, and your local Norco specialised dealer is kind of the point of contact. So where a bike shop could be very helpful is them working with their Norco or their specialised rep to help get a grant of, I've gotten grants for like $10,000 from Specialized and $7,500 from Norco. So those local shops can help with those, but hitting up the shops just for the donations all the time, I tend to avoid it. Other traditional sources can be things like events. Somebody mentioned like a movie night or a beer night, and you get you sell your beer glasses, you can play a movie and get a donation of sales. They can generally be good for raising a couple of $1,000s, and they're fun to sort of build the community, and everyone gets stoked. There's a big movie playing on the screen, and they can quite often provide vital the seed funding. If you can go to a potential funder and have some money to start with, whether it's $2,500, that's usually seen as a big chunk for a small club. So fundraising events and those movie nights can be good to get just those initial dollars together. Crowdsourcing is something that I haven't really delved into in too much depth, but all the time you see these GoFundMe and Indiegogo or whatever they're called, and it's funding for for bigger projects. It's kind of strange that these days crowdfunding is considered, I would consider it a traditional source, but it's kind of a pretty commonplace these days. But places that I've been working with, is there a pointer on this? Do you know?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work? Okay.
You can, not on the TV.
Yeah, it's a pointer.
You can blind somebody.
So other places that I've been hitting up more recently, and non-traditional sources are hospitals, regional development agencies, and tourism departments or chambers of commerce. If anyone has the recent IMBA book, the Bike Park book, I wrote a chapter in there, or like a 3 or 4 page section, specifically about those traditional funding sources. So the first case study here, this is Caliente. About 2 hours north of Las Vegas, just over 2 hours. It's mostly BLM land. The city are involved, and the state parks. So, it's a phenomenal landscape. It's 4 million acres. It's insane how big it is. And I went and had several meetings with different city councillors, county commissioners, the BLM, state parks folks, and just talked about this idea of developing a whole from scratch mountain bike trail system that is both beneficial to the local community, so the kids will benefit, the local families will have somewhere to recreate, and also attract tourists and be good for the economy. And everyone jumped on board. So we committed $5,000 from the IMBA Trail Building Fund. If you're all on our mailing list, you probably got a letter recently saying, please contribute to the IMBA Trail Fund. It's very real. I write my check personally, and lots of people commit funds to that. And then the different regional directors have authority to use pieces of it wherever we think is a good place to do it. So in 2013, we committed $5,000 from the Trail Building Fund, and that was donations from members. It was matched by $5,000 from the Lincoln County Commission, and with that $10,000, we did a sort of conceptual plan. Then it was matched by $40,000, which was $15,000 from the BLM, $15,000 from the Lincoln County Economic Development Authority, and $10,000 from the city. So the city's money came from the bedroom tax. Lincoln County Economic Development Authority see that developing this trail system in their community is a good thing. And then with that $40,000, we did a much more detailed plan and paid for several staff. Joey and Jeremy over there, Chris Lehman, they each spent probably 3 or 4 weeks. So it's probably like a 9 or 10 week process. Staff weeks. They were in Caliente back in November and starting to do like a 40-45 mile more detailed trail design. We have 3 large federal grants that have currently been submitted. The state parks have submitted one, the city have submitted one, and the BLM have submitted one. And those grants are to a much bigger BLM pot of money. And there's a very high likelihood that it's going to be funded, and we'll know by the end of this year. But it could be close to $2 million that comes to that project by the end of this year. And it was started by the 5,000 matching that we were able to go and get started with. It was then matched by the county commission. then matched by the BLM and the city. So this little piece of money was certainly able to multiply itself very significantly, and could lead to close to $2 million by the end of this year for trail construction. So just a quick summary. Number one, talk among yourselves and your team. Who knows who? Who knows the someone at the hospital, or who knows someone on the local Chamber of Commerce board? And think of those non-traditional sources. Like, don't just think of, we got to head up the bike shops. Those guys have been really mean. They're not donating the Camelback tours this year. Bike shops are tapped out. Think of those bigger chunks where you can go and get $10, $20, $30, $40,000 at a time. The events are fun, and they build a community, and they're great to get people excited, and they're good for you guys to raise, $2,500 on a Thursday night, fundraiser. That's just money that you can use to go and get started with. That's not the sort of the end of it. Develop a summary document of what you're doing. And then with these organizations, it's really important to meet with them, to learn who they are, listen, and educate them on who you are. They're going to get, if they have a grant deadline for July 1st, you can guarantee on June 30th, they're going to get a stack of applications like this, and the ones that say to whom it may concern are going to the bottom. The ones that have gone and met with them and sat down and explained who you are and had that face-to-face time, you're going to have a much stronger chance. So listening to who they are and learning about what they want to do in the community is really important. And you guys explaining that, don't just go in there, and talk about dirt jumps and 18-inch wide, super awesome single track. Go in and talk about what you're doing to make this a better community. And then tailor the conversation to their fields of interest. Like, for example, with the Legacy Foundation in Sierra Vista, their website is all about health and wellness in the community. I'm not going down there and talking about tourism. It might happen if we develop a kick-ass trail system, but tailor what you're saying to what they're set up for. Obviously, if you're going to the Chamber of Commerce and they want to see more tourists coming into town, that's the conversation that you're having. Leverage those funds towards other sources. Follow up, send them a letter or an email a week later. What do you think the opportunities are? How can we work together? And then write the proposals. Get them in there.
So the Salida Mountain Trails, it really all began, all the planning process started when the BLM kicked off what we call travel management planning, which I'm sure all of you guys who, if you deal with BLM or Forest Service, kind of heard of this. So basically it's the BLM's process of making sense of this giant road and trail network. And the lore of the story is a handful of mountain bike guys got together and they said, man, we need to pay attention to this, or we're going to lose the trails that we have. There's some kind of classics out there like Lost and Dead Bird and Racetrack, and you look at them at modern times and it's like, man, that's not the greatest trail, but they're really afraid to lose them. But somebody smartened up and they said, man, why don't we ask for what we really want at the same time? So they went through that whole public input process. I think Absolute Bikes actually hired a guy for a while to basically work with BLM to make sure that their stuff was kind of incorporated into that planning process. And so, they asked for a lot. They got a little bit less than that. And so our first project with BLM was in 2008. So, if you guys are getting frustrated with agency world, that was a 4-year planning process before we even broke ground on any trails out there. And so the plan said, okay, we're going to adopt these existing trails, but we're going to reroute them and make them sustainable, deal with soils, erosion, stuff like that. And then we're also going to build new trails. So since 2008, we've been working on this network together. It includes BLM, City, and Forest Service. So just recently, they started work on the Cottonwood Trail. And it's funny when you look back at that plan, I think it was the BLM and the Forest Service were in a little bit of a bicker. It's before my time. But we actually, in our plan, signed that we're going to designate this trail on BLM in 5 years if the Forest Service doesn't do anything. Because I think we were trying to work with them on these trails that started on the Forest Service and ended on BLM, and we're, hey guys, we're trying to deal with this, and we weren't getting a lot of pushback or a lot of feedback. So so that kind of inspired the Forest Service to work on the Columbine Trail, which they recently completed, and the Cottonwood Trail, which they're working on right now. So it's a 37-mile network, and it's pretty cool. Is it's all based right out of town. You can ride everything right from the Boathouse Cantina on the river. So it's a pretty neat system. This group, they have, I think the next one, they have 2,500 volunteers annually, roughly, 20 volunteer hours annually. And so they maintain and sign our entire trail network. Me as a land management agency, I don't really do a whole lot. I mean, as far as like our staff isn't out there, you know, fixing signs and stuff like that, we really rely on this trail group. And I bring that up because it was really important aspect of this group's history when they asked for more trails. And my land manager, you know, I went to the ID team and I said, you know, interdisciplinary, so we could write that one up here. I went to, you know, our other resources specialists and said, hey, they want to add some trails. And one of the first questions that came up was, well, how much more work is this going to be for our staff? And I was able to look my field manager right in the eye and say, I don't think it'll be a lot. They do a really good job taking care of this network. And we've even evolved to, you know, they were kind of reluctant to manage, you know, off-trail use and stuff like that. We've kind of gotten them to see the point in that. And it's almost become custodians of this huge chunk of BLM out on either side of Canyon, where they're helping us with off-road vehicle management and, you know, travel management signing, not just the mountain bike stuff. So we see that as a really huge asset to our office that, like, yeah, maybe we can work with these guys. They're helping us a lot take care of some other issues. So I want to go into our working relationship a little bit. And so, has anybody heard of an assistance agreement? Does anybody have an assistance agreement with their local?
Our board turned down a $30,000 one for frustrating reasons.
So, assistance agreement, I almost, for a while I had equals money, but it's basically, I don't know, do they do it for Forest Service? Do they have a similar mechanism?
Yeah, challenge cost shares.
Okay, yeah. So, basically we can enter into an assistance agreement with organizations that have similar missions as the agencies, and we can give them grants. So it's pretty cool. I mean, the BLM, you have a little end of the year funding, you can give your partners money. So actually every year in our field office, we probably farm out anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 for a variety of things. You know, there's a youth education group that we give quite a bit of money to every year, and so they're kind of our youth education branch to make us feel good about, you know, educating youth. Yeah, you have a question?
So these don't have to be projects on BLM for this?
We use general support. I mean, it's targeted support, but, you know, for the youth one, we support their ecological literacy program, which is basically kids or people taking kids outdoors and showing them, you know, fish and water bugs and stuff like that.
Our national one says technical assistance with mountain bike trails.
Yeah.
That's it.
So we like them. They're a really awesome tool that we have in our tool bag, especially if you guys know about federal spending and you know, end of the year fiscal spending, and things get cut off, and a lot of times we'll be sitting there and they say, we don't have any money, don't spend any money, don't spend any money, and then July comes around and oh my God, we have all this money, spend money. And that is an awesome place to be if you have an assistance agreement, because we can very easily put money into those assistance agreements very late in the year. So a really awesome tool. So then we also have a cooperative management agreement. I think that was up here. So you guys, you have an MOU. But you know, this is basically spelling out our relationship, giving a little bit more detail to what the BLM's doing, what this group's doing. And one of the more important parts is our annual operating plan. We've kind of slacked off on that in the last couple of years. But at one point we thought it was important, and I still think it's important to kind of help lay the groundwork for what we're going to be accomplishing in the next year, and that way, you know, there's no surprises. They don't come up, hey, we're going to build this trail. You're like, wait a minute, guys, I thought we were focusing our time on fixing this trail. So, and another really cool thing is we've used it to allow them to put up donation tubes on BLM land, and we spelled that out to where they can have a donation tube. And we just basically say, we want you guys to maintain it, we want you to collect the fees, and just make sure the fees go back into your organization and doing trail stuff on BLM. So that's been really cool. I don't know how much money they get. I don't think a whole lot, maybe $400 or $500 a year, but better than nothing. And another really important point for me in all of this is to have one point of contact. And this came about when we had a bunch of different projects. We had permits going on with them. We have trail maintenance, trail building, planning, and I get 5 different phone calls, and it was just like that operator game, where you're like talking to one person and then you kind of talk to this person about this, and it just got really muddy. And so we finally said, okay, let's have one person is the BLM contact, and that is the one person that I talk to, and then I can kind of make sure really a clean communication. And I would just urge you to make sure that person is pleasant and understands where the agency is coming from. Ties in with our community values. We can see it's bigger than just a ragtag bunch of mountain bikers. Like, we know this is the real deal. So then
What's a hint that Caleb dropped? What's relevant to the BLM? We should all know one word.
Community.
Community. So every single trail that you talk about should talk about why it's beneficial to the community. You don't necessarily have to use the word community, but you're demonstrating why.
Our success as a national organizing body is very much hinged on your success. So this kind of training is a no-brainer, and we're going to do a lot more of this kind of training. What's our next training? We have one more this year that we'll do.
I'll talk about it after.
Awesome. Carrie will talk to you about it. Thanks to Carrie and her team for doing a lot of the organizing and the logistics of all this. So the last thing I want to say is just more big picture. Doing all this training doesn't mean that, let's say we could do these 3 trainings we're doing this year for every single chapter in the country, in the world for that matter. And that might take us 5 years. So in 5 years, are we done? No way. We'll just start over again. Which is to say, our mission and how we achieve our mission, it'll never be over. So any one of us that think, well, if when we hit the home run in terms of our advocacy, and every land manager out there loves mountain biking and embraces it, we're done. And we can shutter the doors at IMBA and we can all go home and you don't have to volunteer anymore. I don't think that day will ever come, to be honest with you. Even if we had land managers like I described. Why is that? Because what we enjoy in mountain biking is largely experienced on public land. And public lands means, by definition, the public owns it. And the public has a say and aspirations for how that land is used. And as long as we have that kind of democratic approach to our lands, there will always be competing interests and conflicts. And I don't mean conflicts in the sense of trail conflicts. I mean in a much broader sense of how that land is used or not used. We, as mountain bikers, as recreational enthusiasts, will always have to be advocating for what we want in terms of open space, conservation areas that also allow access for mountain biking. The day of probably person, this is a real downer, huh? But that day is just not going to come in the world where lands are suddenly just wide open. We'll always have to be advocates, and so there will always have to be an organization. And I think IMBA, while it will evolve and change, and we will always have to be organized with a national body that connects to what's going on locally and strengthen that as much as possible.